Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's webinar, the Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program, Updates for Program Year 2024. My name's Helen Miller with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating this morning's presentation with Ohio EPA's Tom Hacharik. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items to help you participate and engage with our presenter during this morning's presentation. On this slide, you see an example screenshot of your attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop on the right-hand side of your screen. For this presentation, you're listening in using your computer audio. If you're having sound issues or if the slides stop advancing, please try refreshing your browser. If that doesn't work, try logging off and logging back in. Please feel free to submit questions to the presenter by clicking on the question mark icon and typing them into the questions pane on your attendee interface. You may send your questions in at any time during the presentation, and we'll try our best to answer questions as they come in and during the Q&A portion. If we don't answer your question during the Q&A portion, we'll reach out to you via email following today's webinar. You can also click on the document icon to view included handouts. Handouts today include a PDF file of the PowerPoint slides used for today's presentation and a fact sheet on CEUs. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email after the webinar with a link to the recording, a link to the survey, and a link to your certificate of attendance. The survey will also pop up once this webinar ends. We value your feedback, and we greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing and let us know if there's anything we can do to further assist you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending this year's annual updates webinar. Even though it is being offered in April of 2023, the items that are going to be discussed today are going to be applicable to the upcoming program years. Just wanted to let you know who all the staff are that you're going to be talking to today. Your WRRSP staff include Rose McLean, Angela Fentress, Tom Hacharik, myself, Mike Kelly, and Linda Merchant Masonbrink. There we go. Also, not to be forgotten is Steve Malone, our fearless leader. And today's agenda is going to be just a brief highlight of some of the things we did in 2022, getting the most from your pre-nomination coordination meeting, construction oversight and management for restoration projects, including contract submissions and requirements, addressing full and partial mineral rights severances, a new implementer sponsor table, questions at the end, and will be interspersed with some poll questions throughout. Just a reminder that the WRRSP staff are still operating under a hybrid approach where we are in the office 2 days a week and then working from home 3 days a week. So email remains the most effective way to get a hold of us. We do use the Teams platform for video conferences, but we can also participate in Zoom calls and things like that. But when we're setting something up, it will be in Teams. And we're available for site visits. Oops. Okay, oops. So our 2022 highlights include 27 WRRSP projects were awarded for a total of just about $35 million. And it included 2 dam removals, 20 protection projects, and 5 restoration projects. Now that's a pretty big number for us. And part of it is a reflection of the fact that with lower interest rates, there was some difficulties finding sponsorships in the past 2 years. And it just worked out that a lot of the sponsoring loans that were going to go in 2021 got pushed back into 2022. So it turned out to be a banner year for us and for implementers as well. just a quick overview of the schedule. We are currently conducting pre-nomination coordination site visits, and that period usually begins about March and it runs through the end of July. If you want to do a pre-nomination site visit, you need to get your pre-nomination site visit form to us by July 15th. The nominations will be formally accepted from August 1st through August 15th. Once they are scored and ranked, they will be, those rankings will be made available in our draft program management plan, which is typically issued sometime in mid to late October. But that program management plan includes the WPCLF, or the sponsoring loans, and also the WRRSP projects. And we like to get the final PMP issued by the end of December of 2023. Now, last year was a little bit of an outlier. There were some new things that were happening with some principal forgiveness. And so the issuances of the PMPs got delayed. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but I would look to hold to the October and the December timeframes. Let's take a quick poll.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll, and the question is, how sure are you that you will submit a nomination when you request a pre-nomination site visit? So please select one. Your options are very sure, I'm definitely submitting a nomination. Somewhat sure, I think I'm submitting. Not sure, I need to seek input before deciding. Or I have not participated in pre-nomination coordination. So go ahead and please make your selection. Okay, it looks like most have voted. Please make your final selection if you have not. Okay, I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing the results. There you go, Tom.
Okay, so very sure, 9%, somewhat sure, 17, not sure, seeking input, and then 50% not participated. So, all right, well, that's good for us to know. We just kind of want to get a sense for the audience when we're conducting the pre-nomination site visits. Again, although the WRSP is a highly competitive program, at the end of the day, we really are an assistance program, and we want to get the best product on the ground in terms of protection and restoration projects with our implementers. So it's important for us to know what you're thinking, and maybe this will influence a little bit about how we conduct our pre-nomination site visits. So next.
Okay, and we have another poll here that I'm launching. The question is, have you revised the scope or content of your nomination based on feedback received during the pre-nomination coordination? So select one of those. Never, I always submit the project as originally planned. Sometimes, I sometimes revise the nomination or don't submit. Always, I always revise the nomination based on the input. Or I don't know, I haven't yet participated in pre-nomination. So go ahead and select one of those. And it looks like a lot of people have voted. If you have not, please wrap up your voting. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the result. There you go, Tom.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting to see that the project has always changed. Now, I don't know if that's because of the input that was received during pre-nomination or that it was still kind of an idea and you were just trying to take our temperature on the project. Sometimes and always, so we've got about 30%. That's helpful for us. That's helpful for us to know. Again, at the end of the day, we are really just trying to make sure that the pre-nomination coordination is as useful to you as possible when you're deciding whether to advance with the project into our formal nomination and how to submit it. So appreciate that information. Thanks. Oops. Okay, so we talked about pre-nomination coordination, and for those of you that are our frequent flyers and have participated in the program, you know what we're talking about. We submit a form and we go out to the site and we look at it. But if you're new to the program and you're not sure what we're talking about, pre-nomination coordination is where you submit a form and you kind of put together some thoughts about what the program, or excuse me, what your project might be, and just kind of opportunity to learn about the program and the process. So it's really a benefit for you to help you think about your project and make sure you want to really put the time and effort into a nomination. But it also helps us a lot too, because it helps us get familiar with projects. So the primary purposes of the pre-nomination coordination: introduce us to you, give you an opportunity to discuss the process, help understand the project strengths and weaknesses. It helps us score ultimately for those nominations that come through the door. It helps identify red flags and concerns, and just gives you the opportunity to ask questions. So it helps us introduce implementers to the WRSP staff. It really does put a name to a face when we can meet you in the field and we can talk about something. Again, I've mentioned this before, it is a highly competitive program, but we're an assistance program. And so just establishing those working relationships, I think, goes a long way towards making it a better program and experience for your implementers. At least that is the goal. And it facilitates communication. When you know the person on the other end of the phone or the video, you kind of know who they are. And I just think it makes it better all the way around. Gives you, as implementers, an opportunity to discuss the WRSP program. So obviously you can talk about the pre-nomination process itself, but the nomination form, should you want to proceed to that stage. We can talk about how you find a sponsor. We can describe the types of deliverables that you will need should your project score into fundable range. We can talk about the various types of encumbrances and how they might impact your project. We can talk about the various schedules. If you're a restoration project, are you going to go design build or design bid build, and what that means, and just answer any other questions that you just might have. I think it's important as implementers to understand the project's strengths and weaknesses if you're going to actually put the time and effort and money into preparing a nomination. When we're looking at a project, we're looking at the highest protection or restoration potential, and I think we try to guide you into our thoughts on what that might be. And part and parcel to that is, are there any limiting site or watershed constraints that you're aware of or that we can see? And sometimes you really can't see that from sitting behind a desk. Sometimes you really need to get out into the field. Have the impairment sources been identified, and will your project address them? And we can talk about that. Are there any other features that help the project score better? Do I need to do biological assessments? Well, habitat assessments in the nomination are an absolute requirement. We encourage and incentivize biological assessments, but what resources should you assess and how many should you assess? Because it can be a little pricey. And then how competitive might your project score? And we will never tell you, oh, you're a sure thing to get into funding range. And we will never tell you that, oh, don't bother, you're never going to score high enough. But you can kind of take our temperature on a project, but it ultimately is up to you as implementers to decide whether or not you want to submit a nomination. It really does help us score the nominations. I alluded it to earlier, but provides valuable site and project context, excuse me. And looking at something on paper, even the best site photos do not do a project site justice. So it really helps us just see the project. And so when we're scoring them and looking at them, we understand the project so much better. We can look at the habitat and biological data that was submitted in the nomination and compare those to our observations in the field. And then we can see firsthand the impacts caused by any existing encumbrances, structures, or other infrastructure. So that's the benefit to us. It certainly helps us identify red flags, concerns, and deal breakers before too much time and money and effort is spent on a nomination. In order to be eligible for our program, you have to be at least a warm water habitat stream or a Category 3 wetland. And I think we would probably suggest to you that if you don't think you can make those goals, the pre-nomination would be a place where we could talk about that and we could raise that concern with you. Are there any potentially disqualifying encumbrances or severances like a blanket pipeline easement or surface right or subsurface rights that could potentially be a deal breaker for your project? Do you have willing landowners, and have you talked to them, and are they willing to encumber the property with an environmental covenant, which is a requirement for our program? Is there any known public opposition to the project? And there are other red flags and deal breakers too, but these are some of the most common ones. So there is a pre-nomination site review request form. It is on the webpage. The link will be later. And for pre-nomination, keep in mind, this isn't the nomination, but for the pre-nomination, what we need to see is the implementer information, project location information, lat long, and some maps, and the location to meet, a brief project summary, and a summary of the aquatic resources, the estimated number of wetlands and acreage and or linear footage of streams. And we know that you come to us at various stages of development for pre-nomination. But really right now, because it can be expensive to put together a nomination, at this point, we're mostly okay with a desktop review. Again, we're just trying to get a feel for the project, and we know you might not be submitting. So it's hard to ask you to spend a lot of time and money on habitat assessments if you don't know you're going to, and title searches and things like that, if you're not going to submit. So what's optional, again, is that title search, a real deep dive on readiness to proceed, the habitat and biological surveys, and there are a lot of desktop data available through Ohio EPA, and if you have questions, we can help you find that. The key thing to remember though is the more information you give us at this point, the better our feedback to you will be. Because if you come in really conceptual, yeah, we kind of maybe want to do this, yeah, we kind of maybe want to do that, and then our answer is going to be kind of, well, maybe you'll score this way and maybe you'll score that way. So the more information that you can get us at this point, the better our feedback will be. And it can also be difficult to make eligibility determinations regarding warm water habitat and Cat 3 wetlands without some form of assessment, unless there's existing data. Here is the link to the actual pre-nomination form. It is a fillable Word document, and I am told that it is up and on the webpage and it is live. And there is also another link to some helpful resources that are on our webpage. As you're looking at this and you have questions about the pre-nomination form and some of the helpful resources and guidance and documents you see here, I would suggest that you send those questions and comments and suggestions directly to Rose McLean at the email address there provided. Okay, so moving on to our next topic, construction oversight for restoration projects. One of the things that we've learned in doing this, and we kind of did it on a little bit more of an informal basis, was following through once a project was nominated and you were getting into the actual construction phase. And we've looked at it, and we're going to tighten this down a little bit, and we're going to actually have some requirements in terms of how much oversight and active involvement we have in restoration projects beyond just reviewing pay requests. Now, the next couple slides here are going to talk a little bit about the nomination form and what comes in there, but also in the sense of how it relates to the project as it advances into construction. So the first bullet is very important because we need to ensure that any plans that you submit are consistent with the project that was described and scored in the nomination. And then we'll talk about the deliverables for year one and the deliverables for year two for the post loan award. So construction oversight for restoration projects in the nomination form. Keep in mind the project was scored and ranked based on the representations in the nomination. And so we're assuming now that you've nominated, you've scored high enough and you fell into fundable range, and now you're in the process of whether you're going to design, bid, build, or design, build, you're working with your consultants and you're putting plans together. We're going to be looking at whatever you submitted with an eye back towards what was nominated and how it was ranked and scored. And most times it's not a problem, it's right on board. But we have had instances where we've scored it one way based on certain things, and then plans came in is like, oh, you know, we're changing this. And that's a red flag, and we have to stop and look at this and decide whether or not that's something we want to continue to do, and if it's still going to meet the goals and objectives that allowed the project to be scored. We need enough information to make sure the habitat and biological goals are achievable, and this is in the nomination, and we need to make sure that you've really identified the impairment sources. Are you dealing with a localized impairment or a watershed scale impairment? Now, there have been a very few instances where either at pre-nomination or the nomination, detailed designs and plans have already been prepared because they've been funded by another source, but that's really the exception. So in the nomination form, I mean, this is kind of the level of information. You know, this is a dam removal project where you can see on the shot to the left there was the lake, and you know they were just kind of eyeballing. This is where the stream might be, and then on the picture to the right is just a conceptual drawing of what we would look at. So you've got through that, you've got your nomination, you're in fundable range, and you're now moving into, okay, we're going to start actually designing this thing. And the way that used to always be done was the traditional design, bid, build. And restoration projects were always on a 2-year schedule. So if you nominate a restoration project this year and you find out you're in fundable range by December of the end of this year, then 2024 would be year one and 2025 would be year two. And so your year one requirements for 2024 would be, we would need to see an RFQ, RFP. Once you have a contract on board, we would need the engineering scope of services. Keep in mind that WRSP staff are willing to attend any pre-bid meetings. We've done it. There was a restoration, it was a golf course restoration, and we went out and we were there to answer questions, so any potential bidders could ask questions directly to us. And also in year one, you know, we would be expecting 30, 60, 90% designs and then the final design review. And then year two would be 2025. That's when you would find a sponsor and the funds would actually be available, and then you would go and retain the services of a construction firm and initiate construction. And this is just a little aside, by the way, before you actually can really start doing anything, the environmental covenant has to be recorded before any funds can be dispersed. So that's the traditional design, bid, build. But because not a lot of implementers have the money to throw into design, or the consulting firm wants to get paid, doesn't want to necessarily wait a year, what we found is that most firms go design, build. And so it's a little bit different, and the requirements are a little bit different. So for year one, for 2024, we would need to see the RFQ, RFP for those design build teams, and then we would need to see that engineering scope of services as well. And again, the same thing applies. It's not a requirement, but we are available to attend that pre-bid meeting. And then year two, once the loan has been awarded, then was when you would submit your 30, 60, 90% design and initiate construction. A word about RFQs and RFPs. We are really, we've always looked at these and approved these, but we are learning that we can help you with some of the reviews. We don't typically have a lot of feedback for the RFQ. We just really look at it in conjunction with our engineering unit, just to make sure that it's written in such a way that it will solicit bids from qualified firms. We are weighing in more heavily on any RFPs, and again, we absolutely need to see these. Don't if you go out and request for proposals without running it past us, it could be a problem. But we want to make sure that that RFP describes the goals and objectives, lets everyone know there is a WRRSP budget cap, that change orders require pre-approval, explain that we are reviewing and approving these plan submittals, and that we will need to see the actual bid package. So that's I know some restoration projects, it was a little bit informal how we did that, and now it's formal. And it hasn't been a problem, but we were requesting that you give those RFQs and RFPs 2 weeks before you go to bid. So I've kind of mentioned to do a couple times already, but we are available for pre-bid and pre-con meetings. I think it's useful sometimes for contractors to hear from us exactly what we want. Once the project is underway and the plans are approved, well, even actually during the plan development process in year one, we have found that holding periodic meetings has been extremely helpful in keeping projects going forward, because we don't want to have the situation where we talk to you in February and then we don't hear again from you until June. So having these monthly meetings kind of as touch points, even if there's not a lot to discuss, has been really helpful. And they can be, doesn't necessarily always have to be monthly. And as the project advances, it can be farther apart or even more frequent. It just kind of depends on the project needs. We do intend to get out to all restoration projects at key milestones. And then we do require a formal notice of substantial completion once the construction project gets to that point. And we have always required the as-built survey. Just a note about pay requests. This is a reminder, this is not a grant program where you get a grant and there's a pot of money to pull from. This is a reimbursement program. And so you have to submit pay requests, and then we look at those and we have to determine that those costs are determined to both be eligible and allowable and consistent with the approved management plan, covenant, and the conservation values. Again, this is kind of getting back all the way back to the nomination. This is what this project is intended to do. So if there are anything's different, we're looking at it. There's no set schedule for the submission of pay requests. If you have a $3 million project, we really don't want to see $10,000 or $20,000 pay requests every couple of weeks. But at the same point, we don't want you to wait till the end of the construction and submit one $3 million pay request. So something in between. And we understand, we haven't required monthly or quarterly because projects vary. We try to work with you on what makes sense for the particular project. And an important word about change orders, they require prior approval. And if there's a big change order and something changed, we want to make sure that's still consistent with the project goals. And any work under an unapproved change order, there is a risk. I don't know how real it is, but there's a risk that it could be ineligible for reimbursement. We just want to make sure everyone knows that. All right, time for another poll.
Okay, I'm launching the next poll. So the next poll is, do you know the requirements for addressing mineral rights for property you seek to acquire or restore with WRSSP funds? So select one of these. Yes, requirements for identifying and resolving mineral rights. Other option, maybe, I think I know the requirements, but still need to ask. Another, no. Requirements to address severed mineral rights unclear, or don't know, I have not yet sought WRSSP funds. So go ahead and make your selections or selection. And it looks like many of you have voted. If you have not, please wrap up. And I'm closing the poll and sharing the results. There you go, Tom.
Okay, thank you. So 9% no, the requirements are 13% think they know, and 15% don't know, and 63% have not sought WRSP funds. So for those of you in the top three categories, That's good. That's good to know. It is a complicated. This is a complicated issue for us, and it's really important because severed mineral rights can be a deal breaker for the project, and they come up. They really slow things down, so and can potentially stop a project in its tracks. So I think this is worth. That's why we're talking about this. Oop. I got a blank screen.
Okay, Travis, can you help us behind the scenes?
Okay. All right. Something's back. I think we got it resolved. So severed mineral rights. Let's just kind of start from here. Mineral rights are sometimes referred to as the subsurface estate. Can include oil and gas and coal bed methane gas, liquid and solid hydrocarbon, stone. I'm not going to say it, metalliferous or non-metalliferous ores. And yeah, you can read it as quickly as I can. But basically, they're items that are below the ground. And the mineral rights are typically automatically included as part of a property conveyance, which includes the surface and the subsurface estate. But mineral rights may be sold and owned by a party other than the party that owns the surface estate. And when that happens, then we have to really stop and look at a project pretty hard. Yeah, I'm not advancing. Okay, how to describe mineral rights. So a full title search is required to be submitted with the WRSP nomination. And the burden is on the implementer in the nomination to clearly describe all the mineral rights and their statuses. And mineral rights need to be fully explained in the following sections of the nomination. There is an actual encumbrance worksheet, the description of project ownership section, impediments to project implementation, and readiness to proceed. If an implementer seeks to exclude any portion of a project area because they have severed mineral rights and they just don't want to deal with it and they want to carve it out of the main project, those areas should be clearly identified in exhibits submitted as part of the nomination. So the WRRSP program requires that all surface and subsurface mineral rights be intact, fee simple, and restricted by the environmental covenant. And that's F there is just the language that's included in our environmental covenant. So this is probably the most important section of this slide on this topic. All mineral rights must either be intact at the time the nomination is submitted, or the nomination must include a purchase agreement to attach any severed mineral rights. We understand that you might not want to go to the effort to reattach any severed mineral rights if you don't know that your project is going to score high enough in the funding range, so why would you bother to do that? But if you're serious about moving the project forward, we need to know that there is a real path forward to reattach them before we're going to commit any funds to a project, because we don't want to theoretically award $3 or $4 million to a project only to have the mineral rights not able to be reattached. If the mineral rights cannot be recombined, the entire project could be determined to be ineligible at any point prior to issuing the final PMP or even after. I talked about it earlier, but this is a little bit more detailed. If a portion of a parcel to be acquired is subject to several mineral rights is proposed to be carved out, it will affect how we handle your project. You can do it, but it'll affect your project. And the project cost will be have to be reduced accordingly to reflect that portion of the project that was, or parcel that was carved off. The nomination will be evaluated based on the water resources located on the remaining portions of the parcels to be acquired. So if there are high quality streams or wetlands on the portion to be carved off, and that could affect how you score and rank. We will look at both direct and indirect impacts to water resources from that carved off portion. And again, the bottom line is it could affect the project score and ranking. But keep in mind, we want to know these things at the nomination, whether they're intact or if there's a path forward. But we have had instances where even after a project was placed in the fundable range and we were working on our deliverables, the owner severed the mineral rights and sold them before the project could advance. So be aware that if a project can become can become ineligible if the owner severs those mineral rights at any point prior to the disbursement of the WRSP funds or the recordation of the environmental covenant. That's an absolute deal breaker. Just a note about leases. They're a little bit different, but leased mineral rights can affect project eligibility. Mineral rights leases and their status must be fully described in the WRSP nomination as well, and all those same places that I described in the previous slide. And there are so many different types of variations that happen to leases, and so many site-specific issues that they will be reviewed very carefully as part of our nomination review period. And we do have a legal review of all those mineral rights leases and in the title search. That's why it's really important to describe them, because if we have questions about a lease and how it could affect the project, it could turn out that it's not something we want to touch if we just have too many questions. So, quick summary. Severed mineral rights can be a deal breaker for receiving funding. The aquatic resources of the project that made it eligible have to be maintained in perpetuity. And if there are unresolved mineral rights that we think could jeopardize the project, we're not going to advance the project. And recombining mineral rights can be a lengthy process, so start the process as early as possible for identifying those several mineral rights and who holds them. All right, next poll question.
Okay, I've launched the next poll question. So the question is, are you still having difficulty finding a sponsor? So please select 1. It's difficult. I continue to find it difficult to find a sponsor. Somewhat, I eventually find a sponsor, but it takes time. Easy, I have no trouble finding a sponsor. The last one, don't know, I have not yet needed to find a sponsor. So please go ahead and make your selection. It looks like most people have voted. If you have not, please wrap up your vote. Okay, I am sharing the results. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Well, I continue to find it difficult to find a sponsor. That 4%, that's actually quite encouraging. I know that it was problematic for a couple of years during COVID and during a period where we had low interest rates. I eventually find a sponsor, but it takes time. And I have no trouble finding a sponsor for. So for that 22%, what we're going to talk about now, well, for all of you actually though, is how to make it easier, and something we want to do to hopefully make that easier. Here is a question. Okay, so challenges finding sponsors. So keep in mind here that it's always been one of the challenges for implementers to find sponsors. And again, the sponsors are communities that are seeking a water pollution control loan fund for a wastewater infrastructure project. But we cannot play matchmaker because there's an economic incentive and benefit for a community to sponsor a WRSP project. And we don't do so because we don't want to at least give the appearance of playing favorites to say, hey, you should go to this guy or this community to sponsor your project. So what we can try to do is say, here's the list of people that can sponsor. Now, we do know that interest rates have been rising, and projects that had really low interest rates were generating fewer funds available for the program. And you can see here, there's a table that talks about the comparing of our water pollution control loan fund rates versus the Ohio Water Development Authority rates. And you can see we're still very competitive, and that's why people come to us. But the amount of the discount that a community will receive on its interest rate is based on the function or the ratio of the WRSP project to the WPCLF loan. So it's not an automatic 1% discount. But again, the bottom line is there is an economic incentive for communities to sponsor a WRSP project. So interest rates are increasing, but sponsorship challenges are getting better, but there's some still remain, especially if you have a large, if you have a $4 million project, you need to find a large loan that's going to be able to, whose repayments are going to be able to cover the costs of your WRSP project. We are still continuing to see a lot of federal grants and quote free money that come in that can reduce the amount of WPCLF borrowing and thus the amount of interest that's being generated. And some large communities are now available for principal forgiveness, which generates less interest. So what we have done this year, and we're going to try it out and see how it works, but I think it's going to be a big success, is we're working on a sponsor implementer table. And the goal is to make it easier for self-identifying sponsors and implementers to find each other without us kind of being in the way or being the intermediaries. We know that if you're an implementer and you're trying to find a community to sponsor, there are some communities that are kind of frequent flyers in terms of sponsoring, but there are some out there that aren't aware of it. We know it can be awkward for an organization to call a community and say, hey, you don't know us or you don't know this program, but would you be willing to sponsor our WRSP project? And that can be an awkward call. So what we've done is we identified projects that were at least 2 million in terms of the loan, kind of as a starting point. And we said, your loan is sufficient enough to be able to cover a reasonably sized WRSP project. And would you be willing to be identified and put on a list and have people contact you? And so as a result of that, we are creating a table that includes these self-identified sponsors for 2023 and 2024. And so the table will include the sponsor, project, and contact information, and it'll be updated quarterly. So there'll be a button that will open the table and be provided on the WRRSP webpage under the For More Information section. And for a short period, the button can also be found under the What's New tab. That's kind of every time something new gets rolled out, that's where it's put out. So the bottom line is there are a couple different ways to get to this table. And there will be a link to the table will be located in the WRRSP webpage under the Implementer and Sponsor tabs. And the button and links will be available at the end of April. So hopefully that's a tool that makes it easy for implementers and sponsors to get together, and it'll just be one less challenge that's reduced. So that's the main thrust of what we had to talk about today. We're always open for additional improvements, and again, we're an assistance program. We want this to be the best experience for our implementers and sponsors as possible. And if you have ideas for things you'd like to talk about, there's an opportunity to do that. We would consider that. Submit your suggestions to dfamail@epa.ohio.gov. And possible topics could be how to submit the nomination form, how to put together a management plan, and how to fill out a disbursement request. But they're certainly not limited to that. But those are just some of the things that come to mind. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. We have had some questions come in, and if you have questions, please continue to submit those on your Q&A panel. So our first question is, does the WRRSP require match funding?
That is one of the joys of our program. We do not require a match at all. But even better, we are often used as match. So it's kind of a win-win. We do not require a match, and we are often used as match.
Okay, we have a question on covenants. What is a covenant, and how does it apply to both restoration and protection projects?
Okay, so the intent behind an environmental covenant, it's a legal document that sets forth a series of restrictions that apply to a property, such as no new drilling, no new roads, no new trails unless approved. And there's more to it than that. and the intent is, under this program, I mean, we give out large sums of money for protection and restoration projects based on the water quality improvements that we think are going to accrue to that project. And the goal of the covenant is to make sure that those aquatic resources are protected in perpetuity. And the way to do that is through an environmental covenant that's officially recorded on the county recorder, and it follows the deed and the title for that project. And so what we don't want to have happen is us spend $3 million on a stream restoration or wetland restoration project, or on acquiring a property, and to have someone come in later and say, you know, I'm going to build some a housing subdivision on here, or I'm going to put a sewer line through the middle of this wetland, or whatever it might be, so that the covenant prevents those types of activities from occurring. And that's what a covenant is, and that's what the intent is. It's intended to protect the conservation values of the project that allowed us to fund it in the first place.
Okay, next question. As an implementer, do I need to have regular project progress meetings?
I would say yes. That's one of the things that we are trying to get a little bit better at. Clearly, for complicated restoration projects, it makes a lot of sense to do that. Even during year one, when you're just putting together your management plan and your environmental covenant and, you know, and conceptual plans. But even for some protection projects, it makes sense, because there could be issues that we're trying to work through. And again, we don't want to have a situation where we talk to you at our kickoff meeting in like January or February, and then we don't hear from you for months and months and months, and then everyone's going, okay, hey, what happened? Where's the status of this project? So just setting up regular periodic meetings to just kind of touch base, and even if it's a 10-minute call, I think that's going to really be in everyone's benefit.
Okay, how often do I need to submit pay requests?
Well, that is flexible. You know, the goal is to not submit a huge number of small ones or one big one at the end. I think we can talk about it on a project by project basis. I will say sometimes if you're dealing with a main contractor or primary contractor, you've got some subs and they might be smaller, you know, they might need paid, they might not be able to wait. So you might have to submit those pay requests sooner. But if you have questions about that on a project by project basis, well, this would be a really good topic for our periodic progress reports and meetings.
Okay, can you go over the cutoff dates again for submitting pre-nomination site review request forms and also requesting a pre-nomination site visit?
Yeah, sure. So we are currently accepting and scheduling pre-nomination site visits. And we will conduct pre-nomination site visits up to the end of July. And once the formal nomination period starts, we don't want to give people a competitive advantage while they're working on their nomination. And some people have submitted and they're done, and we're still giving people input. So as of August 1st, we really do stop pre-nomination coordination. The July 15th cutoff for submitting the pre-nomination site visit request form is to give us time to get all the forms in and get site visits scheduled, because it's a really busy time. I know some people submit those forms early, but we do get a flurry of them at the end. And that just gives us time to get these scheduled, because we can be juggling several meetings with several different implementers across the state. And it's not like we submit the form and we can just schedule the next day. We need a little bit of time to get it. We need a little bit of time to look at the form and then schedule the site visit and get out there. So the pre-nom form needs to be submitted by July 15th, and the cutoff for conducting site visits is the end of July.
Okay, and can you also mention the cutoff date for submitting the nomination again?
Yeah, the nomination submission period is August 1st through August 15th. It used to be August 30th, but what we have found is that no matter what that last date is, 99 or 95% of the nominations come in on the last couple days. So we made it from August 1 through August 15, in large part because the review of these projects takes a lot of time, and we need to coordinate. We need to look at them. We coordinate with Division of Surface Water. We coordinate with various resource agencies. We coordinate with our legal. So there's a lot that goes into it, and that extra 2 weeks really helps us. So the nomination period is from August 1 to August 15.
Okay, and also we've had some feedback from some folks about the sponsor implementer table link. They really like that idea. And also Rose just would like you to know that it is live. It is up and live now.
The table is live?
Yes.
Excellent.
And also, you know, the feedback again that you mentioned earlier would be appreciated once they take a look at that. Okay, a couple more questions here. How do I know if my project will receive funding?
So we score and rank those, and then those rankings appear in the draft program management plan that's published typically mid to late October, and then the final PMP is towards the end of the year. There should be like an e-blast list of all of our implementers that it should go out to, that the availability of the document and that the draft and the final have been published. So if you have a question about whether you're on that list or not, feel free to contact us. And I think hopefully Rose won't get too mad at me. I think she'd probably be the best person to contact her directly if you have a question about whether or not you're on that list. But certainly you can send it to me too, and I'll get it to her.
Okay, and Tom, there's a couple last questions that we'll wrap up with, and you can kind of dive into them as much as you want. I know they're kind of general. So what are project expenses that the WRSP can pay for and can't pay for?
That's a big question. So, typically, we're looking at, like, for a protection project, we're looking at the purchase price of the parcel or parcels. If there are surveys that are required, and sometimes there might be a lot split. There are certain things we can do that. So those kinds of things that can be paid for. We do not, I believe, we do not pay for the title search that comes with the nomination, and also if there's some minor, like, enhancement activities that occur. So maybe the main thrust of a project is we're going to acquire a 50-acre parcel with 20 acres of wetlands, but maybe we're going to go through and we're going to break some berms, or we're going to break some tiles. Not a full-fledged restoration project. Some enhancements, those would clearly be eligible. And then for restoration projects, again, we would pay for the detailed plans to be designed, if they're the construction costs, and the as-built survey, and the first year of monitoring. Now, I know that's a very incomplete answer, and I think we can probably have a much more detailed discussion of that. But we do not travel. We do not pay for travel costs, or we do not pay for meals, because the way the program is set up is that the funds have to go, our funds have to go towards directly to activities that are going to protect and restore aquatic resources. But whoever submitted the question, or if there's questions more about that, we can talk more about that.
Okay, Tom. One last quick question that just came in. Will the nomination forms be available prior to August 1st? And do you anticipate any major changes to this year's nomination form?
I do not anticipate any major changes, and if they're not live already, they will be very soon, because we do want to give people enough time to look at the nomination and have a chance to review it. So maybe someone who's on the line or on our end can tell me if I got that right. I would not use last year's form, because it is updated. There were always some tweaks here and there, but I do not anticipate any major changes.
Okay, it actually, Rose just said it is on the web page. right now. So only a few minor changes. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for all those questions. If we have not answered your question, you will get a follow-up via email after the webinar. Thanks, Tom, for your great presentation, and thank you to the WRRSP team for your behind-the-scenes help to address the questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email after the webinar with a link to the recording, a link to the survey, and a link to your certificate of attendance. The survey will also pop up once the webinar ends. We value your feedback, and we would greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing and let us know if there's anything we can do to further assist you. We'd also like to bring your attention to our Encouraging Environmental Excellence Award program, which recognizes entities for exceptional achievements in environmental stewardship. Is your organization going beyond to reduce your environmental impact? Examples can include lighting retrofits, reducing water and energy use, recycling efforts, and process improvement. Is your community implementing sustainable measures to reduce their environmental impact? Examples can include community gardening, energy, water reduction, green roofs, and smart transportation. And many of us have kids in school. Is your K-12 student implementing student-led sustainable activities at their school? Examples include encouraging recycling, water bottle refilling stations, anti-idling policies for buses, and composting. This program has different levels of recognition for organizations, communities, and schools. Please go to the website on our slide to learn more about this program, and the deadline to apply for this year is April 30th. Before we end for the day, let's check out our upcoming webinars. On May 2nd, we have a webinar, Troubleshooting Noncompliance at Small Wastewater Treatment Plants. Do you have problems operating your wastewater treatment plant or noncompliance with your NPDES permit? Is your wastewater treatment plant not running the way it's supposed to run? Come learn how Ohio EPA's Compliance Assistant Unit in DEFA uses cheap and easy, effective process control tools to diagnose treatment problems. You'll also learn how to monitor the treatment system to keep it in compliance. On May 17th, we have a webinar on our Construction Stormwater General Permit renewal. This webinar will cover Ohio's NPDES Construction Stormwater General Permit and the changes that were made during this recent renewal. Topics include permit renewals, updated post-construction requirements like redevelopment clarifications, electronic record keeping, and notice of terminations. To register for upcoming webinars, check out our agency event calendar at the link on the slide. The events link is also on our web page footer at the bottom of each web page. If you miss past webinars, you can go to DEFA's webpage, the link on the slide. Once you're there, you can click on the word training on the left-hand menu column. There you'll find recordings of trainings you may have missed. You can also go to our agency YouTube channel to view recorded webinars. We will post a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. It usually posts within a week of the webinar. We'll also post a PDF copy of the PowerPoint slides with the recording. And the YouTube channel can be found at the bottom of each of our web pages on the footer. The YouTube icon's next to the Twitter icon on the bottom right side. To receive notifications of upcoming webinars, go to our Ohio EPA Customer Support Center. You can create an account, then go to the option Subscribe to Updates. Then you can select the All Trainings, Webinars, and Conferences option. You can go to the link on the slide, or the Customer Support Center link is also at the bottom footer on each of our web pages. With that, we'll end today's webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.